Hi, this is Julie Murphy with the Arizona Farm Bureau, and every Friday, obviously, we're doing our Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher Friday. I'm not talking to a farmer, I'm talking to the director of the Arizona Game and Fish Department, Tom Finley. And you're fairly recently appointed, that was in September, but we've been doing this Farmer, Rancher, Hunter series, and I'm calling Tom our anchor, which is very appropriate knowing the organization that you have to manage and run. And this six-part series that we're completing today for our Farmer Rancher Hunters, the purpose was to give us a sense of the whole management process, the 800 plus species that you guys have oversight in protecting and taking care of, and just the whole system in general. And so I'm very privileged to be able to talk to you, Tom, and I so thank you for doing this. I know this is maybe not your greatest comfort zone, but I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you, Julie. It isn't something that I do very often, and really more because we have 675 employees in our head count. They're all better at their jobs than I am, and we usually try to push them out in front to represent what we're doing as a department because they do it every day.
God bless you. I appreciate it. And you told me before, and I just got to give props to the organization that I'm humbled and honored to work with. You said the reason you said yes to me is because it's Arizona Farm Bureau.
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of history with the Farm Bureau as a regional supervisor in Kingman.
Oh, cool.
And working with Mojave Livestock Association.
Okay.
You were always in attendance, the organization was, and kind of a spark plug and keeping some glue together in some projects we were working on and building credibility with that group. So,
well, awesome. So you know our Mojave farmers really well then.
Pretty well.
Awesome. So we're kind of going to just roll down these questions, try to keep this to 30 minutes because I know you have a tight schedule, Tom. But anyone that joins us live, if you have any questions, if you're wondering what tags are, am I saying this right? What tags are open now and what you can apply for, you can post a question. And if we don't have the answer, then I would just encourage you to go to the Game and Fish Department. Your building here is beautiful, by the way.
It is beautiful. We're really lucky to have it.
Yeah.
We've been in here about 20 years.
Awesome. So I'm just going to start with citing what it says on your website. The Arizona Game and Fish Department is a state agency of Arizona tasked with conserving, enhancing, and restoring Arizona's diverse wildlife resources and habitats through protection and management programs. Based on its mission, Tom, talk about this, your objectives and what you hope to accomplish.
I think what I'd like to start out at is that on the conservation side, which is what you're talking about, because we have quite a bit of attention paid to outdoor recreation as well, but on the conservation side, a lot of what we do is focusing on recovering species that might be in peril, whether it's threatened, endangered, or otherwise rare, and also keeping common species common. Over 820 species of wildlife in a state that now has 7.5 million people in there.
Yeah.
In the state, it's kind of an interesting task to try to get that done. There's an awful lot of compromised habitat, in other words, and it's just by our presence, right? By our very presence with roads and housing developments where we all live. You simply can't take your hands off the wheel and claim that there's a natural, unaltered kind of wildlife, that there's any wildlife population that's unaltered or any habitat that's unaltered. So it requires kind of active management on all fronts.
Right. And we have to know that occurs because new development, all of a sudden they see a couple coyotes walking down the road. It's like, wait a minute, you just paved over my pathway to wherever I found my food, right? I mean,
it's an interesting thing, and it requires the management, not only management through biology and the work that we do to recover habitats or restore species to different places, but also management through hunting to control different populations around the state at a level that is acceptable and minimizes conflict or keeps those populations healthy.
And I kind of want to talk about that because I know there's all opinions on hunting, and that's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to do this series, because our farmers and ranchers really do a good job of supporting the efforts of Game and Fish, and plus they love hunting. And a lot of times people think, well, if you're a hunter, do you really appreciate the animals? Because if you're successful in your hunt, there's actually a kill in step to it. But I just thought it would be valuable for us to learn a little bit more. But, and so that's my first question. What's your most important counsel to hunters in the state? In other words, you've got 2 minutes here, you've got a forum, it's Instagram, and then we'll post this later on the Arizona Farm Bureau website, but what's your first counsel when you're given that opportunity to talk to our hunters?
I suppose to be well-rounded. There's a lot that goes along with actually being in the field and having the knowledge, skill, and ability to harvest an animal, for instance. But it's bigger than that. And being a conservationist, being aware of how we appear to the other people in Arizona who may not be anti-hunting, but would otherwise be sort of agnostic about it. But the goal is to keep those people, if they don't participate in hunting, at least keep them on the positive side of neutral. Because this is actually something that could change for us in the future if we don't keep that wide acceptance. And there's pretty good surveys out there that show a lot of good survey information that shows that most Arizonans feel in support of hunting if they know somebody who hunts and understands something about that. So there's an obligation for hunters to sort of work with those folks and get them to understand why we hunt and keep that, I suppose, keep the optic on hunting at the highest possible level.
Okay. And it truly does help the conservation process because for those species, you said 820 plus species here in the state of Arizona. And then there's a very minor group of those species that are actually set up that we can hunt. But the whole aim from your perspective is that we're managing the species so it doesn't die out because of starvation or whatever.
Yeah, well, and frankly, minimize some conflicts. And I'll give you another example is large carnivores have to be managed and have to be managed through hunting. And we've seen over the last several years that populations of carnivores, if they get into, maybe a little bit above whatever the capacity of the habitat is to carry them, will come to town and they will look for things to do in town. And that includes threats to people.
Oh, wow.
And so I think the department's management actions, but also hunting, keeps that at a level that is sustainable because we're interested in maintaining those populations, but also making sure that we keep Arizonans as safe as we can.
Yeah. Are you surprised the number of species that we have in Arizona for a desert state, or is that a stupid question on my part?
No, it's not stupid at all. Really, I think it's the highest diversity number of species for an inland state, for a state without a coast. But when you travel around, if you've made enough tracks around Arizona, you sort of understand that you can drive an hour and be in something that you didn't think would look that way, right? Whether it's some savanna down in southern Arizona or on top of the peaks or the Grand Canyon or the Arizona Strip, it's pretty amazing, the diversity of the habitats.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes some sense that there would be that diversity of wildlife as well.
That's neat. So I've been asking this question to all of you, but it's that, and my farmers and ranchers oftentimes have an immediate answer to it, but there seems to be a thread woven, a clear thread through farming and ranching and hunting. But what's your theory as to why it seems like every farmer, rancher you run into that hunts, they're a good hunter, they're very passionate about it, they're very conscientious about it, they follow the rules. I know my claim, I want to call it my claim to fame, but it probably isn't. I feel like I know more Arizona farmers and ranchers than a good chunk of people in the state. So I've witnessed how they act, and I've heard their stories as an eyewitness, and I just am really convinced that they have a real passion for doing this right. Why do you think that is?
So I think talking about hunters and the kinship maybe with agricultural operators, maybe in particular ranchers, but in farming too, obviously. I have a little bit of history. I worked for a cow-calf operation in Colorado when I was younger for several years. And the man that I worked for was like my father. He was really a great person in my life. And he actually was probably the person that had the most concern for the land of anybody that I've ever met. And sometimes he railed about environmentalists, but he was clearly, by the essence of the word, the biggest environmentalist I ever met. And I used to point that out to him. But that was before the term was hijacked by people who were on the lunatic fringe, right? He actually was somebody who really cared deeply about everything that was going on. He understood cause and effect and things that were not easy. The fact that, death is part of life, and that sort of primal kind of relationship that you have with the land. And I think hunters, why a lot of ranchers and farmers are hunters, because they all have that in common, that kind of kinship and love of wild places, wild things, and maybe a responsibility or a relationship with those things, if that makes any sense to you, Julie.
Joel, that was a quotable quote. That was awesome. And I feel like that's given me more of an insight about that, because I just am always curious, why is a rancher such a good hunter? Is there a commonality? I think you explained it better. And the story you share with the rancher that you work for, that makes sense. Well, then, so for the uninitiated that has any concerns about hunting, let's flip to the other side of the coin, where some people think we shouldn't be hunting our wildlife. I mean, what are the protocols or requirements that you put in place to make sure the efficacy of our hunting here in the state is next to none? The high standards are there.
I think so. The management of species that we hunt in Arizona is obviously done so that you can sustain those species. We have no interest in impacting a species to a point where it would suffer in the future because of hunting. And I think what they need to know touches back on something we already talked about, Julie, is that with a state like Arizona that has 7.5 million people now and constantly growing, you really can't take your hands off the wheel and claim that it's a completely natural system, because it's not. It's compromised to some degree on all fronts. And that requires a thoughtful scientific agency like the Game and Fish Department to make decisions about managing those species in a way that ensures their long-term sustainability and health. And that involves hunting.
Yeah.
And what is great about that is that it provides really healthy dietary options for a lot of Arizonans, and a lot of field days, and a lot of kind of recharging in that primal way for people who hunt, to get back to something that is a little bit more pure than your smartphone. So
what you were using. Yeah, exactly. And Commissioner Buchanan, who I interviewed prior to you, and so you see and talk to him quite a bit, I know.
I do.
And I didn't realize that even though I have three brothers and they all hunt, I'm obviously not as much. I'm not a hunter at all. So, and I think one of my brothers did mention this to me. Correct me if I don't have all the details right, but I believe he told me that if you have a successful hunt, you have to pack it out. Now, I heard somebody say gut pile, which, you harvested. Maybe we're getting into too much detail there, but you can leave that behind. But is it correct? You have to take it all out. And to me, that's a protocol of respect and taking care of what you're doing. Plus, all the hunters I know like to eat what they hunt.
You're correct about that. There's laws in place that require you to utilize the meat from the animals that you harvest, the game animals. And so that's a really important piece. Sometimes there are groups that sort of attempt to reframe that as something other than it is, saying that hunters walk away. By law, they cannot walk away. But I've never met a hunter who did anything but desire to walk away with all of the meat from whatever they harvested.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into what a successful hunt is. It's not always the harvest, obviously. I don't remember the harvest in a lot of hunts, and we've been a hunting family for a very long time, as much as I remember the moments with my kids.
Sure.
And what we experienced together, and that was a really cool part of it.
How many kids?
But I have two, a son and a daughter. They're both super passionate hunters, and their spouses are as well.
So. Okay. So this is a perfect segue, because that was basically my next question. What have you hunted?
Everything that we can hunt, I think, would be the way to say it. As time goes on, everybody's busy. My son is a lineman. My daughter works for a nonprofit called Congressional Sportsman Foundation that is charged with actually protection and policy setting, or support for policy setting for fishing or angling, hunting, and recreational shooting in North America. And they are both really busy with their careers, as their spouses are too. So we probably focus these days more on big game than anything else. But we've hunted everything. My kids followed me around on mules when they were little, and then I followed them around on mules when they got bigger.
Oh, how fun.
We've done a lot of hunting through the years, and it's probably the most significant times that we've had together. The most we've learned about one another was hunting together, sometimes through some pretty tough conditions, but that was the best of it.
Yeah, and it's the stories you remember as the stories you tell. That's so cool. And you said you made the reference North America, so you guys have probably hunted beyond Arizona.
We'll hunt anywhere we can get a tag, basically.
Okay.
So, and we'll hunt small game when we have time.
Okay.
But it tends to it's a kind of getting to be a more rare and rare opportunity to get to go anywhere in the West, just because of the number of people and the demands, and sometimes herds compromised by long-term drought, etc. But we're there. We're
You're
always
there.
friendly,
So what's been a favorite hunt?
I can't say that I have one, because we'll go hunt and we'll back each other up on
Okay.
whatever is happening. And I'll give you an example. Probably my favorite hunt is the last one I went on. Sometimes my daughter had a cow steer tag in southern Arizona this year and had a blast with her. But I'll give you an example from a hunt before that, where my son and daughter, both adults, both with their own families, were alone with me one day. And I love my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law and grandkids, but it's such a rare opportunity to get to be with your adult children that it was a super memorable time. And it was a late season archery elk hunt that my son had, which is like hunting ghosts, right? It's not a gimme.
Yeah.
He had a bull tag, and my daughter, we glassed 11 different bulls. My daughter outglassed us by glassing 9 of them.
Wow.
And actually said to us, I feel like the only hunter in a family full of gatherers, because we were having some fun with each other. And so to me, those moments are what it's about.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and they harvest a lot of game, but that's not all there is to it. It's those moments. So.
Well, what's been fun to hear you talk about this, you haven't really talked about the hunt. You've talked about the relationship you had with your kids.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well, and that is the hunt, right? There's something about hunting that is related to the efficacy, as you say, of being able to harvest an animal, but related to what makes a good hunter. I think the bottom line is being a little more sophisticated and actually thinking about things beyond that and how we portray hunting to other people. Mm-hmm. That kind of squishy middle that may or may not support it right now, but we determine that by our actions. And then being involved in one of the conservation organizations in Arizona and giving something back, I think is really handy.
And the hunters I've been talking to, and even outside of this little series that we've done, the cream of the crop hunters, they said, Julie, we come back empty-handed a lot. Because some species, and then the type, like you were referring to the archery hunt with the elk, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And I think you can, my son is about 6'6" and has gigantic legs. I think they start right below his neck. And he can cover the ground really, really well. Wow. And he can harvest game, but there's a lot of times when he just doesn't. And I think to a great degree, my kids don't want it to end, because you have to wait in Arizona on a draw to hunt big game, whether it's archery or, there are some over-the-counter opportunities, but some of the best opportunities require quite a wait. Yeah. And nobody in our family really wants to get it over with quickly.
Yeah, the whole experience. So what makes a good hunter then, based on the fact that you've hunted a lot, you've hunted with your family, if you had 2, 3, or however you want to approach that, your answer to that question, what makes a good hunter?
I think it would be that somebody who obviously on face value has the skill sets, knowledge, skill, and ability to harvest something, but also does that safely, respectful of other people, including landowners, land managers, and the land itself, and then has some reverence for wildlife. Not a fan of people who actually don't respect what's harvested and how that looks to the people that also own that wildlife. But also, I think maybe people who recognize that we have some debt that we owe the earth.
Oh, sure.
And I don't mean to sound too 70s in that, but I really do feel that way, that we all have. I don't know what the calculus is to figure out what that debt is, but I appreciate people and hunters who try to find some way to give back.
Right.
And whether that's habitat project work. So hunters completely support conservation in Arizona. We don't get any general fund money, as I think you're aware. But the bottom line is hunters, anglers, and recreational shooters pay for just about everything. There are a few other funding sources that help out a little bit, but it's all discretionary.
So your budget can vary from year to year.
It's actually pretty solid, because to a great degree, what people that we work for spend on is a little bit recession-proof, because it's part of their culture, and they're willing to let go of other things to keep supporting conservation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So can I ask, what's the average annual intake of what people have to spend on tags and
It's complicated because there's tags and there's licenses, but also there's excise taxes. So our budget fluctuates right around $150 million from about 27 different funding sources with stipulations on each one of them about eligibility, et cetera. But just about all of that money is discretionary spending in some way that people have to decide to spend with the department and spend on conservation.
It's unlike if I don't pay my utility bill, the lights will go out. So if one year I can't hunt, I'm not going to hunt, or something happens.
When it sort of goes to recruitment of new hunters, if there are a lot of like competing activities for a young person, for instance, or somebody who's not a young person but wants to get into hunting, who woke up to the fact that that could be a neat thing to do one day. But there are a lot of competing activities out there, and if you don't have a way to provide them some kind of positive threshold experience early on in their journey,
right,
they may just play soccer and forget about what we do. But we need, out of the 7.5 million Arizonans, we need at least a percentage of them, not just to buy hunting licenses, but to actually do the other things that they do, whether it's volunteering or just caring about the land. So.
And you guys have some neat programs. I know years ago, to get into that mode of caring for the land, years ago they asked us at Arizona Farm Bureau to host a booth for youth for a fishing day, and your people, the game and fish people, were out there teaching first-time anglers what to do. It was really cool.
Oh, those are the greatest event ever.
Yeah.
If anybody listening ever has an opportunity to go, I suggest you do it, because for a lot of our families, and I would bet a lot of the people that are following this right now, their kids grew up doing things that other kids never had a chance to do. So those fishing clinics, we also have some hunting clinics that people who don't have a background in that can go to, and they'll help them get started on that. And they're actually mentoring the adults too, but a lot of times those kids would have never had an opportunity to catch a fish. And so you have sort of a target-rich environment. We'll stock right before those clinics so those kids can all feel what that was like.
Yeah, it's experience normal. First fish I ever caught, I still can tell you exactly when, where I was at. It was bigmouth bass. I was with my cousins. They were second cousins. An uncle had a lake out in Missouri, and I tossed it in there, and I don't think it was even a minute. And I was kind of having a struggle, so of course the cousin had to help me. But I still remember that day and bringing that fish back to show everybody. And we cooked it and ate it that night.
Do you know how old you were?
I was probably 8 or 9, maybe 10. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think there's some work that shows that kids who fish at 4 or before years old are more likely to fish for their entire lives than if we wait a little bit, which is really interesting.
I haven't really fished that much since. So
should have got you when you were 4.
Should have got me when I was 4. So, and then for that matter, you just told us the insights for a good hunter. What makes a great Arizona participant of our natural resources in the state?
I think there's a lot of crossover there. Obviously, some kind of respect and reverence for the fact that this is something worth protecting, and not actually just taking from it, but at least leaving it as good as you found it, maybe a little better.
Right.
And that could be by contributing on the backside in volunteer projects or funding for a project or something else. But I think that's the main thing. There's so many competing interests out there right now, so many people outside, not all of them born with some kind of outdoor ethic or had that ever instilled in them. But I think people could work to, and we're doing that on lots of fronts, but could work to sort of instill that ethic a little bit late in some cases. But
we're having a struggle, some of our ranchers, with the off-highway vehicles, and so we're even actually putting a video together to remind us just respecting the land, stay on the designated routes. We're not bashing somebody. I mean, our farmers have off-highway vehicles oftentimes just to check the cattle, but just some of the abuses that are going on in some of our natural environments, and I think some of it comes from all of a sudden they get something they can race. It's big, it's loud, it's fast, and yet they've never really had some of those experiences about respecting the land.
Some of those machines are pretty impressive, aren't they?
They are.
And I think one of the things that makes those things so popular on the hunting side in particular is that a lot of the roads that we used to be able to get around on, I started my career 34 years ago, you could get around on a lot of roads that you can no longer get around on. And that was probably federal funding cuts and decisions about how to spend federal budgets on land, on federal lands or public lands. But the bottom line is there are places that I took my truck at work or at play many, many years ago. You can't get a truck through there now. And so that I think a lot of hunters have experienced that, not because they want to road hunt, but because they want to get to the place where they want to start hunting. And there are other people that do things like road hunt, but so it's sort of become popular. But in the last probably decade, the other side of society has really learned about that, and they are out there in force.
And that's the other side of society that they're talking about, because several of my ranchers will tell me they're not hunters. Yeah. They're just coming out and they're spinning brodies and they're tearing up the ground, and they pile their vehicles back onto the back of the truck and they go home, and they're not their ideas of hunting. Their ideas to go fast and be outside.
There was a law put in place that it just went into place this January, that people who want to register any OHV have to now take a class, and it's educational. It talks quite a bit about responsible use.
And that was just in the last session, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And we worked with ADOT. The department worked with ADOT to get that video up on the site as quickly as we could, given the turnaround that we had. And we did get it up by January 1st. So I think that's going to help.
Good.
I think the department, people working with some of the rental companies has really helped, and the rental companies have been really welcoming, because it also hurts them when the people that are renting their vehicles crash them repeatedly because they're doing those things that would not be okay by the rental companies themselves. So we've made a lot of hay, and the rental companies have really helped us get to a place where there's a little bit of a change that I think has even been noticed by some of the landowners you're talking about, but it's a journey. We're still working on it.
I bet. Well, hang it there in there. You're doing a great job. And this is a perfect segue to my last question. Obviously, if someone wants to know about especially these youth programs, they should come to your website. Yeah. And I just tell people to Google it, Arizona Game and Fish.
There's a whole bunch of information on our website about mentored hunting and angling programs. And we probably have the most active, or at least one of the most active programs in the state. So if they want help with that, they can go through there, or if they can't find it because websites are sometimes painful to navigate, they can call one of our regional offices or our headquarters here.
And is there any other kind of insights, help, based on what I'm asking, that the public needs to know about the Game and Fish that would help them? Do we wrap this up? But I get most of my views after we post this on Instagram, and then we also post it on Arizona Farm Bureau. So sometimes we get as many as 500-600. One of my dairy farmers I interviewed, there were 1,500 views on it. So we know people are checking out these videos.
I think we've touched on most of it, but I'll add on just a little bit that I've been here 34 years, and it's getting harder and harder to find somebody around here that was here when I got here. But I'm
God bless you.
super impressed with the people that we have.
Oh, awesome.
And they're extremely dedicated. I'm just amazed at the number of hours and the passion that they'll put into the job and the passion they have for what they do. And really thrilled to work here. And if you have a chance to get to know some of our people, I recommend them, because they're really, really a great group of people. I'd say the same about the commission. There are lots of commissions around the nation, lots of commissions and boards in Arizona, but I think they spend on average about 1,500 hours a year in their commission duties. These are volunteer duties.
Really?
And I think they're really dedicated to what we do, and they're working at the policy level. Obviously, our employees are working at the implementation level, but just want people to know that. And while we're managing again, I'll reiterate, 820 plus species of wildlife in Arizona. We're doing that without one penny of general fund money. If you can find a way to join the groups that are part of our partnership, the wildlife conservation organizations in Arizona that are partners with the department, please do it, because they need your help too.
I want to repeat that. Not one penny comes from Arizona's general fund to you guys.
That's right.
You're having to raise all your own money.
And we like that model. Yeah. That isn't a complaint. It's a statement that we're proud of. We try to run the department like a business and try to put conservation on the ground without
Yeah.
having to tax people for it.
Well, Director Finley, I'm so glad that I made you my anchor in this Farmer Rancher Hunter series. I think the whole process for me, I've learned so much from it. Joel, just before we say goodbye to our audience, did we have any questions? Which is good. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Awesome. Well,
but thanks again. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel.